My fiancée and I were madly in love, but as a broke college student, I couldn't provide for her. So when I asked her to marry me, she rejected me and walked away. But years later, she came crawling back, begging for another chance. Be me, Ryan. 3 years with Maya and everything felt right. You know, she was the one I'd text first when something good happened. The one I'd call when my day went to hell. The one who knew I liked my coffee with cream but would still ask every morning. Because she cared about the little things. We had this rhythm, this easy way of being together. Made me think, yeah, this is what people talk about when they say they found their person. So I planned it all out. Not some grand gesture thing, because that's not us, but something special. I picked this spot by the river where we'd gone on our 4th date, the one where she'd worn that blue dress. Kept laughing at my terrible jokes about the geese. I've been carrying the ring around for 4 weeks. Every time I felt it in my pocket, my heart would do this stupid little skip thing. Made me feel like I was 18 again. The whole drive there, I kept rehearsing what I'd say. Nothing fancy, just honest. How she made me want to be better. How I couldn't imagine doing life without her. How 3 years have felt like both forever and no time at all. I had this whole speech planned about how we talked about the future, about kids and houses and growing old together. How I wanted to stop talking about it and start living it. But here's the thing about plans. They're great until they're not. We got to the river and she was being herself, pointing out the families with their kids, talking about how the water looked different in the evening light. Just Maya being Maya. I'm standing there thinking this is perfect. This is the moment. And I get down on one knee, pull out the ring, and I start talking. I tell her I love her, that I want to spend my life with her, that I can't imagine anyone else sitting across from me at breakfast. For the next 50 years, I'm looking at her face, expecting tears or excitement or something. And instead, I see this look I've never seen before, like she's seeing me for the first time, and not liking what she's seeing. Then she says it, just like that.
No.
Not even no with an explanation. Just no, like I'd asked her if she wanted to try the new Italian place downtown, and she wasn't in the mood for pasta. She follows up with this, I'm not ready yet. And that's it. That's all I get. No, I need more time. No, I love you, but no, maybe in 8 months we could talk about this again. Just, I'm not ready yet. Like she's talking about getting a dog or changing jobs, or something equally low stakes. What do you even say to that? I mean, what's the right response? When someone you've been with for 3 years, someone who's met your parents, and spent Christmas morning with your family. Someone who has a drawer at your place and knows your Hulu password. Tells you they're not ready to marry you. Do you ask why? Do you ask when they will be ready? Do you ask if there's something wrong with you? With the relationship? With the timing? I didn't ask any of those things. I just listened. She kept talking, but not really saying anything. Just variations on the same theme. She wasn't ready. She needed more time. She didn't know when she'd be ready. It was nothing I did wrong. It was just how she felt. I put the ring back in the box and stood up. My knee was killing me from kneeling on those stones, and I felt like an idiot. Not angry exactly, just stupid. Like I completely misread everything. All those conversations about our future. All those times she'd see a wedding dress in a magazine and make some comment about how pretty it was. All those hints I thought she was dropping about being ready for the next step. The drive home was quiet. She kept glancing at me like she wanted to say something else. But what was there to say? I wasn't going to beg or argue, or try to convince her. If someone's not ready to marry you after 3 years, if they can't even give you a timeline, or a reason that makes sense, then what's the point of pushing? That night, lying in bed next to her, I kept thinking about that phrase. I'm not ready yet. Yet. Like it was inevitable that she'd be ready someday. Like I should just wait around until she figured it out. But here's what I realized. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to be with someone who had to talk themselves into wanting to be with me. Hey there, Maya here. I need to tell you about Dylan, because otherwise none of this makes sense. I met him at that coffee shop on 7th, the one with the good Wi-Fi, where I'd go to work sometimes when the apartment felt too small. He was always there, always at the corner table with his laptop, and this confident energy that just drew people in, you know? Not like he was trying too hard, just naturally magnetic. At first, it was just casual. He'd nod when I walked in. I'd smile back, basic human politeness. But then one day the place was packed, and he gestured to the empty chair at his table, and I thought, why not? We started talking. And God, he was different from Ryan. He traveled for work, had all these stories about different cities, different adventures. He made my world feel small, but also like there was so much more out there I hadn't even considered. I wasn't falling for Dylan specifically. If that makes sense, it was more like he opened this door to possibilities I didn't know existed. He'd mentioned some gallery opening he was checking out, or this underground restaurant scene he was part of. and I'd find myself thinking about what that kind of life would look like. Not planned out, not predictable, just open to whatever came next. Here's the thing. We weren't dating or anything serious, just coffee shop conversations, some flirty texts, the kind of thing that makes you wonder what if, without actually crossing any lines, but that wondering was enough to mess with my head. When someone shows you glimpses of a completely different way of living, you start questioning everything you thought you wanted. That was when Ryan proposed. We're sitting by the river, and he's being so sweet and earnest, pulling out this ring and talking about forever. How is that fair? How are you supposed to make a decision about forever when you're not even sure what else is out there? When Ryan proposed, I felt this wave of panic, not because I didn't love him, but because I realized I'd never really explored what I wanted from life. With Ryan, everything was safe, predictable, planned out. But what if I wanted something different? What if there were other types of relationships, other ways to live that I'd never even considered? So I said no. I told Ryan I wasn't ready, and that was the truth. I wasn't ready to close the door on possibilities. I hadn't even explored yet. I wasn't ready to say this is it. This is my entire life. When I'd only ever been with one type of person, in one type of relationship. I wasn't ready to be the girl who got engaged at 28, without ever wondering what else was out there. But here's what I didn't say. I didn't say I'd been wondering if there were other ways to live, other types of people to be with. I didn't say that when I looked at that ring. All I could think was how it felt like choosing one path, when I hadn't even looked at the map to see what other paths existed. Ryan took it better than I expected. He didn't yell or demand explanations, or try to convince me I was making a mistake. He just listened, which somehow made it worse. Part of me wanted him to fight for me, to show some passion, to prove that what we had was worth giving up everything else for. But he just accepted it, like he'd already half expected me to say no. The weeks after were weird. We kept living together, but Ryan had completely checked out. He was polite but distant, like we were roommates instead of a couple. He'd stopped asking about my day, stopped making conversation, just handled the basics of coexisting. Meanwhile, I kept running into Dylan at the coffee shop. He'd tell me about these events he was going to, these people he was meeting, this whole world that seemed so much more exciting than anything I'd ever experienced. Looking back, I think Dylan represented freedom more than romance. He wasn't necessarily the answer to anything, just proof that there were other ways to live. When he'd mentioned some spontaneous trip he was taking, or some opportunity that had fallen into his lap, I'd find myself thinking maybe I could be that kind of person too. Maybe I could say yes to uncertainty, instead of always choosing safety. The truth is, I was in love with the idea of options, more than I was in love with him. But how do you know the difference when you're questioning everything you thought you knew about what you wanted from life? You know what hit me about 4 days after the proposal? She went back to her normal routine like nothing had happened. Making coffee in the morning, working on her laptop, planning her week. Like I hadn't just asked her to marry me, and she hadn't just said no. Like we were supposed to just continue on as roommates, or whatever the hell we were now. 3 years together and she wasn't ready. That's all I needed to know, really. Not ready after 3 years meant not ready, period. I wasn't about to sit around waiting for her, to figure out if I was worth committing to. That's not how I operate. So I made my decision by the end of that first week. Clean, simple, no drama. If she wasn't sure about me after this long, then we were done. Not as some ultimatum or way to force her hand. Just basic math. You don't build a life with someone who's still shopping around for better options. I started handling the logistics immediately. Found a studio apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Started going through her stuff when she wasn't around, figuring out what belonged to who, looking into how to get off the lease, without screwing either of us financially. Business stuff, you know? When something's over, you clean it up properly. The whole process took about 4 weeks. I kept everything quiet, handled the paperwork and apartment hunting. When she was out exploring whatever new scene she'd gotten into, she was going out more anyway, coming home with stories about art galleries and pop-up restaurants. Good for her. She was busy figuring out what she was missing. While I was busy figuring out how to leave, Maya was completely absorbed in her own world. She'd breeze in and out, talking about some events she'd been to, or some person she'd met, barely noticing that I was doing anything different, which was fine by me. Made everything easier when she wasn't paying attention to what I was actually doing. The weird part was how straightforward it all was. 3 years of shared everything, and untangling it was just spreadsheets and phone calls. Lease paperwork, security deposits. Everything had a clean solution. That didn't require either of us to get emotional about it. This wasn't about hurt feelings or wounded pride. It was about recognizing reality and acting accordingly. When someone shows you they're not sure about you after 3 years, believe them. When someone can't commit but won't let you go either, Stop waiting for them to make up their mind. When I had everything sorted, I told her I was moving out. Simple, direct. She looked shocked. Asked if we could talk about it. I said there wasn't much to discuss. She told me she wasn't ready. I wasn't interested in waiting around. That was it. She tried to say something about needing time to figure things out, but I cut that short. Time for what? She'd had 3 years. I was just done with the whole situation. When Ryan told me he was moving out, I genuinely thought he was bluffing, like making some dramatic gesture to get me to change my mind or something. We'd been living together for 3 years, had this whole life set up, and he was just going to walk away because I said I wasn't ready to get married? It seemed impossible. I tried to talk to him about it, Asked if we could sit down and figure this out. Maybe come up with some kind of timeline that worked for both of us. But he just looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. He said there wasn't much to discuss, that I told him I wasn't ready, and he wasn't interested in waiting around. Just like that. No emotion, no anger. Just this calm finality that scared the hell out of me. I kept thinking he'd cool off, realize this was crazy, come back and apologize for overreacting. But the next day I came home from work, and half the apartment was empty. His clothes, his books, his stupid collection of vinyl records. All of it just gone, like he'd never lived there at all. That's when it hit me that this was actually happening. Ryan was really leaving. Not making a point, not trying to scare me into proposing to him or whatever, but actually ending our relationship. Because I'd said no to his proposal, the panic was immediate and overwhelming. I'd been so focused on keeping my options open that I'd never considered the possibility that one of those options was losing him completely. I called him that night, probably a dozen times. He answered once, told me he thought this was best for both of us, and that was it. No room for negotiation. No willingness to hear me out. Just this cold politeness. That made me feel like I was talking to a stranger. When I tried calling again, he didn't pick up. That's when I did something really stupid. I texted Dylan. I know how this sounds, but I was panicking. I'd been thinking about him as this possibility, this option I was keeping open, and suddenly I needed to know if it was real. If I'd thrown away something good with Ryan for something that could be even better with Dylan, or if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. I asked him if he wanted to get dinner, maybe talk about where we were heading. I was trying to be casual about it, but honestly, I was desperate. I needed to know that rejecting Ryan's proposal hadn't been a complete disaster, that there was something real waiting for me. On the other side of this mess, his response came back about an hour later, and it was like getting punched in the stomach. He said he wasn't really looking for anything serious right now, just keeping things casual and fun. If I was interested in hanging out sometime, no strings attached. He was up for it, but he wanted to be clear that he wasn't the relationship type. No strings attached. Not the relationship type. After weeks of flirty conversations, and all those hints about the exciting life he was living, that's what it came down to. He'd never been interested in dating me. Never saw me as girlfriend material, just someone to mess around with when he felt like it. I sat there staring at that text for I don't know how long, trying to process what had just happened. I'd turned down a proposal from someone who loved me, someone who wanted to build a life with me, because I thought there might be something better out there. And the something better turned out to be a guy who saw me as a casual hookup option. The next few days were a blur of desperate phone calls and pathetic text messages. I called Ryan constantly, left voicemails trying to explain that I'd made a mistake, that I'd been confused and scared, but I knew now that I wanted to be with him. I told him about Dylan, about how I'd realized it was all just fantasy, about how I understood now that what we had was real and important and worth fighting for. He never called back. The few times he did respond to my texts, it was just to tell me he thought we should both move on. No anger, no hurt feelings that I could work with. Just this complete emotional detachment. That made it clear he was already gone, like he'd flipped a switch and turned off everything he'd ever felt for me. I tried everything. I sent him long emails explaining how I'd been scared of commitment, but realized now that I was ready, that I wanted everything he'd offered and more. I even reached out to his sister, hoping she could talk some sense into him. Nothing worked. He'd made his decision, and that was it. The worst part was realizing how completely I'd misread everything. I'd thought I was keeping my options open, exploring possibilities, taking my time to make sure I was making the right choice. But really, I'd been taking Ryan for granted, while chasing after some fantasy that was never real to begin with. Dylan had never given me any reason to think he wanted something serious. All those conversations about galleries and restaurants and his exciting lifestyle, he was just being friendly, maybe a little flirty, but nothing more than that. I'd built this whole elaborate fantasy in my head about what our life could be like together, and he'd probably never thought of me as anything more than a potential hookup. And Ryan? Ryan had been ready to commit his entire future to me, and I'd thrown it away because I was worried I might be missing out on something better. What kind of person does that? What kind of person rejects a proposal from someone they love because they're curious about what else might be out there? Now I had nothing. No Ryan, no future with the man who'd actually wanted to build something real with me. No Dylan, because that had never been real to begin with. Just me, alone in an apartment that felt too big, trying to figure out how I'd managed to lose everything by wanting everything.